Welcome to the Intuality AI podcast. I'm Dr. Howard Rankin, along with founder and chairman of Intuality AI, Grant Rainier. And over the last few weeks, we have been looking at predictions made by the Intuality AI system on COVID progress and predictions about where cases and deaths are going and whether we flatten the curve or what are we doing. And we've been fairly successful up to date in our predictions. So, Grant, what have we got today?
Okay, so we're going to go through the top 10 states and the top in terms of number of deaths and the 10 with the least number of deaths and show those charts. But even before that, we're going to get everybody up to date on the world and the United States and Canada and the UK.
Okay.
So here we go. The deaths in the world, this is the chart that Intuality has made based on the information it has at this point in terms of total deaths in the world. And it's projecting right now out into September of about 400,000 deaths. And so that continues to grow. There doesn't seem to be any flattening of that curve at all. The next chart is of the US. And it does show a flattening of the curve as it has in the past. In this case, sometime in the latter part of July, and then early in September, a second wave is being predicted. So that's the overall result of Intuality's analysis of the death rates projected for the United States at this point. Canada. It's projecting, again, something very similar to what it's shown before. It's moved the flattening of the curve, or at least the slower growth, out into the latter part of July. And in September, early September, again, a second wave is predicted. And then finally, for the UK, the same sort of a curve, where in the latter part of July, a flattening of the curve there as well. And then sometime early in September, a second wave. It looks like, in this case, the number of deaths that is projecting for in July, before as it flattens, is somewhere around 43,000 deaths.
In the UK, right.
Right. So now we're going to go to predictions of the 10 states with the most deaths in the United States, and these are ranked in descending order. And of course, we all know that New York has taken leadership here. That's a bad way to say it, probably. But this is quite a curve that Intuality is coming up with for New York. It's showing a substantial increase in deaths over a very short period of time, somewhere around June 5th. And then later in around July 3rd, another slight spike in deaths as well, and a final flattening out at somewhere around 34,000 deaths in the latter part of July. But then again, in the last part of August, it's showing a second wave being projected.
Do you have any insight on why we have that sort of steep increase in early June, or that's just what the system is predicting?
Yeah, I really don't. I wish I had an answer to it. Of course, Intuality is analyzing all kinds of data associated with the coronavirus reported data from various sources for the state of New York. And in this case, it's coming up with a very different looking curve, which may be changed as we go forward here, but that's the way it looks right now. So it's sort of a warning, and it may turn out not to be true once we get there.
Okay.
New Jersey is the next state down. They have a flattening of the curve somewhere around the middle of July with continued growth, but not at the same rate. And then in August, right at the end of August, a second wave as well. Massachusetts is the next one down, and they're very similar. They have a slower growth starting in July and a second wave possibly occurring right around the 1st of September. Michigan doesn't seem to have any flattening at all. It seems to be a continuous growth all the way from today, the 15th, to the latter part or the middle part of September. And we're looking for some flattening, but it doesn't seem to be there at this point.
Now, one of the things to note there is that the number of deaths in Michigan obviously are way less than New York and New Jersey. And I guess we'll come to that when we look at some of these other graphs about this relationship between curve, numbers, and decisions to open.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just point that out. You mentioned opening. Intuality makes its own projections totally separate from all of the various organizations, political people, and so forth, as to when to open. And so it does make its own prediction of when those decisions would be made. And in this case with Michigan, is predicting that an opening decision will be made starting around the 18th of this month.
Yeah, and again, that's when the system detects favorable change, right? Significant favorable change that would justify opening.
That's correct. Yes.
Although that's still an open question. Let's go to the next one.
Okay. And in the case of Pennsylvania, the next one down, again, they have a flattening of the curve occurring in the mid to latter part of the summer, but still a growth all the way into September, where again, a second wave is being predicted at this point. Illinois is the next one down. They are going through to the 1st of July, where there's a flattening, or at least a slower growth of deaths, all the way through to the latter part of August. And then again, sometime in the latter part of August, a second wave occurring. Connecticut is the next with their similar chart, a growth until July 3rd, and then through the summer, a somewhat slower growth of deaths and a predicted second wave in early or latter part of August, early part of September. And then in California, they have pretty much a steady growth all the way through to September, with probably a kick up in the growth in the death rate sometime in the latter part of August, but not dramatically different. It seems to be a steady growth all the way through this period, even though their death rate is far below the other states that we've been talking about. And here again, the system is indicating, predicting an opening decision being made by the state government somewhere around the 19th, and we know that's already started. And then finally, Louisiana is the next one down. They have a pretty substantial, consistent growth rate, even though the number of deaths are well below those of the other ones we've presented here. But there seems to be quite an aggressive increase in the numbers of deaths during the latter part of the summer. And maybe, and I'm not sure why, but the system is somewhat flattening out that growth in the latter part of August, either as part of a second wave or not. So we're not quite sure what's happening there, but this is the projections of the system at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that the spike in sort of late August actually is a reduction in the rate that has happened previously.
Yeah.
So because they'd had no flattening, that doesn't present as a second wave. It actually presents as a reduction, right?
That's correct. Yeah. And so maybe one is offsetting the other here. So we're not quite sure about Louisiana, and we'll keep tracking it. And finally, Florida. Florida looks like many of the other ones, where there's a slower growth in the mid to latter part of the summer, and then a predicted second wave starting in the early part of September. Now, we've shown you the 10 states listed in descending order by total number of deaths to date, and highlighted those. We thought it would be worthwhile showing the 9 states with the least deaths, and we can comment about those, Howard.
Yep, absolutely. And again, I think these data and graphs will raise an interesting question. So here is Wyoming, right?
Yeah, Wyoming, you can see the deaths are very small. Currently, it's about 9 deaths,
Right.
raising in a steady growth all the way into September, up to a maximum of somewhere around 400 deaths accumulated. So that's pretty low, but a consistent growth rate. And that might have something to do with the fact that the state is so rural. It takes a while for the virus to migrate through the population.
And I think that's actually an important point. In more rural areas, there probably will be outbreaks, but they won't be like they are in cities where thousands of people can get infected at one time, and so it is going to have a different pattern. And here in Wyoming, what this is telling me, they have a low death rate that's going to continue,
Right.
right?
Uh, and we go to Arkansas, and I didn't mean to cut you off there,
No,
but
no problem.
there is a somewhat similar curve here with a short-term jump here in the next few days, according to the system, and it's really, we're only talking about a few deaths difference here. So this may be just uh, a small change that occurs, going from roughly somewhere around 10 to 11, and then going up to about 13 deaths accumulated by by the middle of September.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the reasons why we wanted to show some of the states with the least deaths. So if you looked at this and you say, well, we've only got 10 or 11, and in 4 months' time, we're only going to have another 3 or 4, which technically is not flattening a curve, but there really isn't much of a curve to flatten to begin with.
Right.
And so you need to look at that and take those absolute numbers. And in a situation like that, whether it's specifically, Arkansas or wherever it is, just because low numbers continue, is that going to be a basis for keeping restrictions in place or for opening up? Because again,
Right.
the numbers are low, very
And
low.
that's a very good point. And we'll see what happens in these more rural states, how that plays out. The next state is Montana, something very similar. They are, and this is going from the lowest state up to the higher states that have the least number of deaths. So we're going in reverse order here. But this is Montana, and somewhere around, I don't know what the actual number is at this point, but it seems to be somewhere around maybe 30 deaths today, and reaching somewhere close to 200 by the mid part of September. But a steady growth again.
Right.
Hawaii, the same sort of situation where currently they're running somewhere around 20 or 30 deaths accumulated, and getting up to about, I'd say, somewhere around 230 by the mid part of September.
And it's interesting looking at the rural areas where you think are much less densely populated. Um, and also, it may be that because of that, or in those states, there are less opportunities for people to gather in in enclosed spaces. I was just reading about the outbreak in Kerala in India, southern part of India,
Oh yeah,
where they have, their food bazaars or what have you are just crammed streets. There's really no opportunity for distancing and what have you.
yeah,
And there've been, huge outbreaks there, simply because people are still gathering out of necessity, I guess, there
yeah,
in these crowded spaces. And in some of these more rural areas, there just aren't A, the numbers of people, or B, those sorts of situations
yeah,
where there's going to be a big gathering of a lot of people in a very enclosed space, especially for a long time. Those seem to me the three variables that are the most damaging. An enclosed space, a lot of people, and the amount of time you're exposed to it.
yeah.
So it was just interesting. That's pure speculation on my
Yeah, and I
part.
should mention that you mentioned India, and I should mention that the system is tracking and making charts for predictions that get converted to charts for over 500 different countries and governmental districts. And India is definitely one of them. And it may be that we want to have a follow-up podcast highlighting some of these major countries where we think there may be a major problem in controlling the spread of the virus.
That's Hawaii.
Okay, so now North Dakota is going from about 15 or 10 or somewhere around there up to a maximum of about 100 by the end of September or middle of September. And again, rural state and a slow, steady growth rate. So that's it. That's what we've got at this point. And again, we are, the system is running 24/7, updating itself with all of the data that comes in as soon as it comes in and making new charts. And we are going to continue to spread the word through podcasts and also showing the information that you see here on our website as well.
Yeah, and if you like these podcasts, we encourage you to subscribe. We'll continue to do them on at least probably a twice weekly basis. And certainly if there are dramatic changes that we see, we'll continue to update them and give you the data that we have and the application, the artificial intelligence application that Grant has developed over 30 years to predict. And clearly this is a situation where there is it's not a simple binary one. We're looking at those rural states. So we can say, well, those rural states, aren't, the rate of death is going to continue, but it's a very low rate of death. So where's the trade-off there between health and economics? And it's also likely, I think, over time that some of these smaller states are going to get an outbreak or two, and the numbers are going to suddenly shoot up for a couple of weeks. I think that's likely somewhere, don't you?
Yeah, I do. It's not any secret that the virus is slowly migrating to the more rural areas. The question is how damaging is it going to be? And so we're going to stay on top of it. At least the system is going to continue. And we will continue, as Howard has said, making at least one or at least two, hopefully, podcasts per week updating this information. And to help us out, I hope you would just go down to the left-hand corner of this screen and subscribe. It's free, and it would help us out to be able to build our viewer base, and that would be a good indicator of it that we very much appreciate.
And also, don't forget, you have the ability to access the website, intualityai.com, where some of these data and predictions are available. And you can find out more about Intuality AI in general, how it developed, and so on and so forth. Anyway, thank you so much, Grant, and thank you guys for watching. We'll be back in a couple of days with the next update. Thank you for watching.